Hello, and welcome to Season 12, Episode 2 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop. Oh, wait, I said that at the
You
end.
usually do it at the end. That's wrong.
Is it, it's almost unbelievable that we're into Episode 12.
Season 12, you mean? We had Episode
Same
12
thing,
a
same
long time ago. We are, of
That
course...
also was amazing.
Yes, we are, of course, reading The Closing of the American Mind by Allan Bloom. This time talking about the first chapter post-introduction and preface and all of that, talking about the Clean Slate.
Yes.
What sort of differentiates America as opposed to many of the European countries. And I misspoke last time. I have read this section before, too.
Oh.
I think this is the extent that I've read of this book beforehand. So I think next time I'll be actually reading something I've never read before. But I have read this discussion just a couple months ago.
In what context have you read this?
Same context as I was talking about last time, was at the Hertog seminar. Because we're reading Saul Bellows' Ravelstein, which is based loosely, the character Ravelstein's based loosely on Allan Bloom. And so we read this as sort of an introduction to the course about sort of who Allan Bloom was and things like that.
You are the most conferencing person I've ever met.
What does that mean?
You go to the most conferences.
Yeah, I guess
seminars
I
and
could have
stuff.
figured that out.
Because you're going somewhere tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah, going out to New Jersey for a Witherspoon Institute seminar.
Witherspoon.
Natural
That sounds
law.
hoity-toity, doesn't it? I'm going to Witherspoon.
It is at Princeton.
Ooh,
Yeah,
fancy.
so I guess it's even more hoity-toity.
As you may know, I attended the Harvard of Missouri. No, of the Midwest.
I don't think you claim that title.
No, I claim that UMSL was the philosophical center of St. Louis City.
So you went to the Harvard of St. Louis.
Although I was not in St. Louis City, I was in Normandy. Well, it might be Belle Nor or Belle Ridge. No, Belle Nor, I think. They claim it's in Normandy. Small towns.
Okay.
Small towns which are little inner ring suburbs of St. Louis City.
Right,
It used to be a golf course
right.
adjoining a convent.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, like the South Campus was a convent.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. I got infuriated briefly because that happens to me. When we toured, Jonah and I toured UMSL when he was going to go to college. And they have the honors classes in the old convent.
Right.
And so it's an old chapel, cute old building.
Oh,
and
you've told me
stuff.
about this, yeah.
And they, on their online advertisement for the university, they didn't pixelate, they erased the cross.
Yeah.
That is the stone cross on the top of the building. And I wonder if any like anti-Christian students showed up and like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Because why would you do that?
Yeah, it's insane. Anyway.
Don't you think that's just really weird?
Yeah, no, that's really crazy.
That you would block
edit
out
cross.
a physical feature of the building.
Yeah.
And it's not a Christian building anymore. I mean, they took all the religious artifacts, relics, or whatever you might want to call them, out of the building, and they sold it
Right.
to the state of Missouri.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy. But anyway, what
I kind of want to track down the person who did it.
do what?
The actual person
Yeah.
that made the decision to do that. I bet you I could.
Is that a
With a series of sunshine requests,
Yeah.
I bet you I could track down that individual.
Yeah. That's a crazy decision to make. I don't know why you would ever erase a physical feature of a building.
On an online video.
Yeah, that's
advertising the school.
crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yes.
But yes, in this chapter, essentially what Allan Bloom is arguing is that Americans have a clean slate when it comes to education, as opposed to other education systems, in England or in France.
Very much like the roof line of the UMSL building after it had been erased.
It's a
It was
clean
slate.
Exactly.
No icons up there.
Right. Gosh.
I'm in a weird mood.
You are. But
I'm very tired.
What he argues is that the education system in America, like the pre-college education...
Why are you telling me? I know this. I read it.
Oh my gosh. I'm telling whoever is unfortunate enough to be listening to this podcast right now.
I thought you were trying to explain it to me. I know what it says.
No.
Yes,
but
he's
can you
focusing.
let me? All right, no, go ahead. You
No,
tell
go
me
ahead.
what it's about.
No, right. Go ahead.
What he's saying is that you are a clean slate when you come into college as an American, as opposed to other countries where you're sort of informed within a philosophical tradition. You don't have like a specific grounding in America that other countries do.
And I think what he was writing when he was writing it was accurate. It's no longer true.
Right.
Because there is a religious and philosophical structure that I think a lot of college students are coming in, especially he's talking about like the Ivies and,
Right.
the more prominent, higher, what he called higher performing students. At the time he's writing this was in the 80s.
Yeah. 87.
And he's basically making the argument that the American students are essentially more pragmatic, not really as informed about the classical literature and the books and the religion. Then he goes on to kind of explain it's even more than that. It's become, at this point he's writing it, that there's like really no foundation because you used to have a common foundation of understanding of the Bible, certain documents like the Declaration of Independence and all that. And so now students are coming in when he's writing this, that they don't have that kind of what do you call it? Kind of a common understanding
Right.
of civic mindedness, I guess you'd say.
Because he says, that used to be sort of like the charm of American students. Like he saw it as a positive thing. Like this is on page 48. It says, European students whom I taught always knew all about Rousseau and Kant, but such writers had been drummed into them from childhood, and in the new world after the war, they had become routine, as much a part of childhood's limitations as short pants, no longer source of inspiration. So these students became suckers for the new, the experimental. But for Americans, the works of the great writers could be the bright sunlit uplands where they could find the outside, the authentic liberation for which this essay is a plea. The old was new for these American students, and in that they were right, for every important old insight is perennially fresh.
Yes.
It's just like if you're coming from a place where it's not drilled into you from the very beginning, once you do have access to these things, you can really dive into them and really appreciate them. It's not boring to you as it would be if you were reading them from, age 11 or whatever.
Yes. And when I'm feeling optimistic about our society and our future, I feel the same way he's describing it about young students today. Because you do see, I don't know what the percentages are, but you do see a real revitalization, especially in our young men, I think, of relearning or learning for the first time or discovering the great books in history. Like you talk about fascination with Roman history or Greek history and that sort of thing. I feel like it's coming back in vogue, but it's still outside the educational system. It's like popular podcasts and social media accounts that are fascinating. And I follow a couple of them. Like there's like a couple of them that talks about like great architecture, artwork and stuff like that. And, and I'm a clean slate when it comes to a lot of that stuff. Yeah. I certainly was in my 20s, but we had a decent foundation coming into college when I graduated in '88. But I think what he's describing was accurate then. I think more so now with the points he's making. But I think it's even gone a little bit further though, because there's almost like this indoctrination. Right. It reminds me of. Like 1984, is that what it is? No, Fahrenheit 451. Like the dystopian future where the TV screen's as big as the wall, blasting at you day and night. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So I feel like that has really come to pass, and nobody reads books, and the firemen, still are causing the fires. I mean, I mean the firemen in the future are the anti-firemen of today because they burn books with kerosene. Yes, no, of course. Instead of putting out fires like the heroes in present day.
Right, because then he says, he even quotes himself, when he wrote back in 1965, he says, this is what I used to think, that they were, some of the best students that we've ever had. There's this great sort of spiritual yearning. They're coming in as clean slates, but they're willing to give up what they have to really dive into these things and learn it. And he says, then I began to notice strange things. This is on page 50. He says, for example, for the first time, American students were really learning languages. And there were the signs of an incipient longing for something else. Science had been oversold. And he starts talking about now, if you look at really what the American sort of education is, it's all completely science-based, right? It's all complete STEM focused, right? You'll take English courses, but for the most part, you're trained in very technical, fields within high school and early grade school. It's all sort of in that sort of science focus. And he says, well, then once you get into university, you kind of just completely get away with all of that. You do away with all that, move on to something that's different, that isn't as boring to you anymore.
Yeah. One of my favorite podcasts is that All In podcast. And when I was reading this, I was thinking about them because they were hyper technically creative and competent and proficient in their areas, and of course became very wealthy. But sometimes they talk about some stuff that are like basic civics and basic kind of common sense working class stuff. And then, although these guys tend to start off very poor, right, and work their way up as opposed to like inherited wealth, but they still have a tin ear to some things, which I think is really kind of funny. Because they're so smart on some other things, but I think there's a lot of people that were, and he alludes to this, technically proficient in certain areas of study and without an understanding of God and religion and that foundation. And he talks about his grandparents a little bit later in this chapter, how they were kind of, I don't know if you can call them simple, but they certainly didn't have formal education, right? But they certainly had a better understanding and a better wisdom about what was important and how to live a good life and raise children.
Because he says, I started to see these things. He says, I was convinced in the early 60s that what was wanted was a liberal education, to give these students this outlet. But he says, by the mid-60s, universities were offering them every concession other than education, but appeasement failed, and soon the whole experiment in excellence was washed away, leaving not a trace. The various liberations wasted that marvelous energy and tension, leaving the students' souls exhausted and flaccid, capable of calculating but not of passionate insight.
Yes.
He says, that when you have just this completely free, pick and do whatever you want education, then you're not really getting the insights you need, right? Sort of this reaction against, this pure sort of science-focused, very STEM-focused, and then move straight into liberal education where it's just everything, then you're not really thinking properly. You haven't been trained on how to think about these great works.
Yes. And I don't think, I think he would agree that it's not something that you can effectively create or educate people with without the foundation first in the home, and as the first educators of children being the parents. Right. And he talks about how the parents have basically stepped away from that responsibility. In large part, where's that quote? I have it highlighted. He says, it's like bottom of 58. I may be jumping ahead for you. It says, parents can no longer control the atmosphere of the home and have even lost the will to do so. And he talks about Nietzsche. I guess Nietzsche, in like a lot of our readings, he's all over the place. Yeah. And I've never really studied Nietzsche at all. I don't know what I've read of him, but I don't think it was a whole lot.
I've never read anything directly that he wrote, but I've read a lot of stuff that cites him and quotes him and things like that.
I tried to read it a long time ago, but it was difficult. Yeah. And so I didn't.
Okay.
Well, he mentions this. He says, Nietzsche said the newspaper had replaced the prayer in the life of the modern bourgeois, meaning that the busy, the cheap, the ephemeral had usurped all that remained of the eternal in his dating life. And of course, he says television has replaced the newspaper, and now the internet has replaced the television. He didn't say that. I just said that.
Yes.
And it talked about how it weakened the family's authority. And I think I think he would agree with me that you need to have that family foundation before you can really learn about the great books and the art and really understand it well. Because he talks about he says, it's not evident to me that someone whose regular reading consists of Time, Playboy, and Scientific American has a profounder wisdom about the world than the rural schoolboy of yore with his McGuffey's reader. And he talks about Lincoln, being self-taught. You read some of those old biographies of, like the founding fathers or like Lincoln, especially because he was dirt poor, basically. And they were self-taught, And how do they do it? They borrow books from neighbors. Maybe a wealthy neighbor had some Greek and Latin books, and they somehow figure out how to learn Latin, or have somebody help them learn, and then go to school for a couple of years before they went to essentially university, if they went to university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what he says. I mean, this is jumping back from where you were. You jumped to like the end of the chapter.
It's 4 more pages.
But he talks about, this distinction between the French. He says with the French, people are either, they follow Pascal or they follow Descartes, right? There's just sort of the two paths, these are two types of people for
They're either
for the French.
Rationalists or no.
Yeah, but I was
Oh, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. I was motioning for you to finish your thought. What is they're either rationalists or
religious.
Yes.
Looking for some sort of divine meaning and divine inspiration, as opposed to just studying the equations.
Right. But he says, what are like the philosophers for the Americans? We don't have anything like that. We don't have any system where it's like, oh, well, you follow in the line of this person rather than this person. We can't point to like really any character types like that.
And the only thing we have is political philosophy.
Right. And he says, he kind of keeps talking. He says, you can't just get a French passport and become a Frenchman, right? That's not what it means. And I like what he says here. The French language, which the French used to learn very well, did not exist for the sake of conveying information, for communicating men's common needs. It was indistinguishable from a historical consciousness. Frenchness is defined by participation in its language, its literature, and the entire range of effects it produces. Somehow the legalistic arguments about rights do not touch the privilege conveyed by participation in it. In America, there are in principle no real outsiders, while in France, persons who, although citizens, are marginal to this tradition, for example, Jews, have always had to think hard about what it is they belong to. And he says, when you're a part of France, when you are truly a French person, you are more than just someone with a French passport, more than just someone who follows the laws of France. You participate sort of in this French language that incorporates all of these ideas that have been being thrown around for, who knows how long in the land that you're kind of standing on. But when in America, you don't have anything like that. You don't have, aside from, the founding fathers and like what you said, like political philosophy, you don't have these big schools of thought that sort of divide people in that sort of way.
Yeah. Well, I like how he says, a Jew in America, by contrast, is an American as anyone. And if he is singled out or treated differently, unconditional outrage is the appropriate response. And there's a lot of truth to that. Also, I think the French don't like Jews.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in France that don't like Jews. They can consider them not really French. They're the other. And I'm not even talking about the immigrants and stuff. I'm talking about like the regular French.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like Jews.
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
I've never had an understanding of that. I mean, I understand that it exists. But there's like this weird hatred of the Jews. And then I think it almost like self-perpetuates because then like if you're like Jewish or you're half Jewish or you have any sort of like Jewish name, you got to feel a little defensive.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, these people all want to murder us. And then it kind of makes you pull back and rely upon your own Jewish community. And then it's like, then everybody's like, well, why are those Jews just staying over there by themselves? Well, because you want to murder them. Is safety in numbers? Right. I don't know. But I just never understood it. And I still don't understand it. But I mean, I understand like, there's a lot of political stuff going on with the state of Israel, as far as appropriate actions and all that kind of stuff. But it's beyond that. It's like an irrational hatred of a group.
Right.
Strange.
Then he continues on because he says, there's kind of a plus side to this, right? The Americans don't have this real distinct like philosophical school that they belong to.
Yeah, it's like an empty bucket. You'd fill it with fluids.
He says, to Americans, Homer, Virgil, Dante, Shakespeare, Goethe belong to everyone or to civilization, and perhaps they do in the long run. But this is not the view of Greeks, Romans, Italians, Englishmen, and Germans, or of the Jews with their book that belonged to them, that told their story and embodied, so to speak, their instinct. He says, the Americans, they don't have a book. They don't have like an author. He kind of points like generally to the Bible as like the most influential book like for American thought. But again, that's not an America specific book. There's no like one author, one work that's like meant to encapsulate, what it means to be an American, one like real national classic. We've just never had that. I was kind of reading this. I was trying to think of what that would be. And I can't think of a single example that would be like, this is the American book.
No, I mean, I think the only thing I think of is not philosophical. It would be like Hemingway, or Mark Twain, one of those like a novel or some sort of, or Grapes of Wrath, or Steinbeck. now, but it's not philosophical, although there are philosophical themes, I guess you'd say. There isn't some, deeper philosophical, that's an American philosophy. It's more of an amalgamation of a lot of different things.
He says, the closest analog, he says, this is page 55, he says, our imagination is not turned towards a Joan of Arc, a Louis XIV, or a Napoleon who counterbalance our equivalent of 1789. Our heroes in the language of the Declaration contribute to a national reverence for our Constitution, also a unique phenomenon.
Yeah.
All this is material for self-consciousness and provides a superior moral significance to humdrum lives as well as something to study. So that's the closest thing you can land on as like the defining text in some ways, like the Constitution. Political writings.
The
Declaration.
the Federalist Papers, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so that I think you used to, and when he was writing this, I think you did. But now it's there's such a concerted effort to undermine that,
right,
and to say it's all racist. He mentions that. So the next paragraph, but the unity, grandeur, and attendant folklore of the founding heritage was attacked from so many directions in the last half century. It gradually disappeared from daily life and from textbooks. That's really true. I mean, I think I mentioned, I don't know if you were with me, when I mentioned to a group, I think it was a group you were with, about how if you read like some of the most prominent, like the great closing arguments in legal history, they're peppered with references to the founding fathers,
right,
and especially to the Bible and Bible stories. And you would almost never use those kind of references in a jury trial today.
Right.
Because it's not shorthand. You'd use pop references. You'd have, of course, I'd be outdated, but you have to, use like Star Wars references, or some sort of common thing that you would expect everybody to know.
Well, you saw that recently. I forget which some federal court, but they were citing Hamilton, like the musical, not Hamilton the person, but Hamilton the musical, pulling quotes from that. Like in the opening of one of their arguments there, and it's just like ridiculous.
Yes. There was a ruling just last week against Trump.
Yeah, it was against Trump. I forget what.
It was
ruling.
Not Hamilton though.
Yeah.
It was something.
But the Hamilton one, I think, was an argument against Trump. I forget exactly which one.
What was it? It wasn't Humpty Dumpty, was it? It was something. I thought it was something absurd. That the Humpty Dumpty wouldn't be absurd, but it was something that was like so trivial to be putting in such an important decision.
Right.
But I think there is something to the criticism of a lot of our so-called elite, that they're a bunch of what you call theater kids. They're all for drama and look at me and I'm the center of the show, instead of just doing the nuts and bolts like he's advocating here, of learning the subject and doing the work and contemplating it, rather than just understanding the surface value of everything. He did mention an author that I appreciate, but I have not read extensively, even though I have, I think, 2 or 3 of his books. H.L. Mencken. Mm-hmm. So in 2 seasons, I got to get one of the Mencken books, because I'm going to force myself to read Mencken.
Right. Because he references Mencken, there on page 55. He says, like, really our driving focus is the unbroken ineluctable progress of freedom and equality. He says, no one serious or notable has stood outside this consensus. You had to be a crank or a buffoon, that is Henry Adams or H.L. Mencken, respectively, to get attention as a non-believer in the democracy. I thought it was fun. I've never read any Mencken either.
Oh, yeah, he's I think he was a monarchist. He certainly did not believe in democracy.
I have one of his books on my shelf. He wrote a book, The American Language, talking about specifically American English as opposed to British English, and why it's its own thing. So he was interested in all kinds of things.
Oh yeah, he was like the earliest version of a syndicated columnist. Mm-hmm. He had commentary about everything and anything.
It's a big book too. It's not like a small volume. It's like a big thick book on the English language, the American language specifically. It was
one of the first books I got from Books Galore back when. It had this Mencken's Chrestomathy. Yes. It's a compilation of his writings.
Yes.
Well, I learned of his existence through one of my favorite, maybe I should disclose this, but I'm going to. My favorite websites is Ace of Spades. And the quote on the top banner, which has always been there as long as I've known its existence, is something along the lines of, sometimes sometimes a man just has to raise the black flag, spit on his hands, and start slitting throats.
Wow.
I think that's the quote.
Well, I know he also has a quote. I think
That's from Mencken. It says Encho Mencken. I'm like, who's Mencken? And then I said, who's Mencken? And then I was at book school early the next day.
There you go.
There's Mencken.
There you go. I think he has another quote. I hope I say it right. I think it's him, but he says, democracy is the theory that like the common man knows what he wants and deserves to get it good and hard. So it's, you get what you vote for.
Yeah.
That's democracy.
That was an old, was it Ed Koch? It was somebody over in New York that it lost some election, and it's like maybe a tax issue or something like that. They wanted something to happen, and the voters didn't approve it. And he said, "Well, the voters have spoken, and we're gonna give it to them good and hard. Give them what they wanted, good and hard." And I always appreciated that.
Yeah.
I may be completely misremembering all that, but anyway. So where were we at? I completely got us sidetracked on Mencken,
right.
but that's 2 seasons. It's a forecasting.
Yes.
If we have 2 more seasons.
Right, but he continues. He's talking about the Bible, the respect for the sacred, and that's where he brings in what you mentioned about the family, that it has to start in the home.
Yes.
Because he says, the moral teaching becomes the religious teaching, right? There's no abstract doctrine in sort of American life. Is at the top of page 57.
Yeah.
He says, what you were supposed to believe in. You don't have these abstract philosophical concepts of what's moral, what's just. It's just rooted like in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And that being sort of the book, along with sort of this civic idea as well, rooted in the Constitution. That's what kind of ends up forming like the American idea here, and that always has to start in the home. And that's what we saw for so long. It's what kind of kept our society together, our culture together, was this common understanding of the Bible and of the Constitution that was encouraged not necessarily in school but in home. Yeah,
and I love what he says here in the middle of 57, because we often talk about like the broken home and the single parent and this is degeneration or whatever. But that's not really the problem with American society. And I love how he puts it here. He says, "I'm speaking here not of the unhappy, broken homes that are such a prominent part of American life, but the relatively happy ones where husband and wife like each other and care about their children, very often unselfishly devoting the best parts of their lives to them. But they have nothing to give their children in the way of vision of the world, of high models of action, or a profound sense of connection with others." And boy, there's a lot of truth to that.
Right.
And there's a lot of people in suburbia that are just like, oh, we just want to make everybody happy. Like it was previously known as like the helicopter parents and the ones that give participation awards and that kind of stuff. But it's like a broader sense of there's nothing grounding a lot of families, and we're not real aggressive here in our home, but I think we have a certain amount of foundation. Well, I certainly have strongly held views that I share with my sons.
Yes, of course.
And so I've done that as we got older. I've done that a little bit more than I did when you were littler. But I started to focus on that as you guys became teenagers, because I remember when I was a teenager, and I was a little wilder than any of you have ever been, hopefully. But I always, when I was doing something stupid or reckless, I always had the sense in my mind, oh, damn it, if Dad ever finds out about this, I'll be in big trouble. And it keeps you, it literally does keep you from doing the absurdly stupid things. Because you're like, he really would. This was a really bad idea. And so just that, my dad had his faults, but he was rock solid, like granite consistent, to a fault, some circumstances. But you always knew where he stood and where he was going to be, because he had a schedule. Any time of day, on Wednesdays he's here, and noon and all that stuff. But I think there's a lot of value to that. You have to have some sort of foundation, and then the kids can go off and make their own decisions or whatever, as the case may be. But they always have like nagging feeling, like, is Dad watching me?
I like what he says at the bottom of 57. He says, "Ritual and ceremony are now often said to be necessary for the family, and they are now lacking. The family, however, has to be a sacred unity, believing in the permanence of what it teaches, if its ritual and ceremony are to express and transmit the wonder of the moral law, which it alone is capable of transmitting, and which makes it special in a world devoted to the humanly, all too humanly, useful. When that belief disappears, as it has, the family has at best a transitory togetherness.
Yeah.
People sup together, play together, travel together, but they do not think together. And then that's where he brings up, educational TV marks the high tide for family intellectual life.
Yeah.
If something interesting's on PBS, that's about as grand as it gets these days. We've sort of lost even, the tradition that we had.
Yes. And then I already talked about the next stuff he said, because I
Yes.
jumped ahead.
Yes, you jumped ahead.
But I like this quote. He says, parents can no longer control the atmosphere of the home and even have lost the will to do so, with the TV and the internet and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and it's hard, like, I think we're unusual. Of course, you'd know better than I would because you're going over to friends' houses. But as you guys were little, we go over to other families' houses. The TVs are always blaring.
Mm-hmm.
It's rare for us to have a TV on in this house, really.
Right.
Now we would play, selected videos and stuff like that, and we would watch TV more often 10 years ago than we do now. But it was never just on. Like some families, they come home from work or school or whatever, the TV's just on in the background all the time.
That's crazy. I can't stand it.
I can't stand having commercials on.
You mute between every segment,
and it's a lesson. That's a huge thing that you should share with everybody you know. Mute all commercials, and if you don't, and they have a celebrity spokesperson, name them because they're trying to mind control you by a recognizable voice.
Yeah.
It's studied.
Yeah.
So like George Clooney's saying, rent this car or buy this car, you have to say George Clooney because then you've broken the spell.
Interesting.
Been doing that for years.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things, especially when I was little, that I thought was so strange is that we never had like a video game console.
Yes.
We had the Wii, which wasn't something that you'd like play online with friends.
Correct.
But every other family I knew had a PlayStation or an Xbox, and that was like what everybody did when they got home from school was you get on the Xbox or the PlayStation.
Yeah, that was 100% your mother,
Really?
And I supported her. But because I was like, oh, we should get a game because I used to play video games. I played Atari. We had one of those back in the 80s, and I had a lot of fun with that. But it was a different video system game. So it's kind of like what Wii is. It was when you were little. It's not. It doesn't draw you in and suck you in as much. But yeah, so it was. We didn't have that, and it was I thought it was a brilliant decision on her part, and I supported it. When something like, yeah, you're right, because when you guys would come home, you like do homework, or you might read.
Right.
I mean, there are so many of your friends. I remember when you were little. You'd have kids over or whatever, or like I'm not going to name names. Let's say when Sam had a neighborhood friend over or something, I would say, hey, we're going to go to the library. You want to go with us? They had never been in a library, didn't have a library card, never would never go to a bookstore. It's just absurd to me, but the vast majority of people in this community have never been inside that library.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's right there. It's free. And when you have little kids, that really is super crazy. And especially in the summer, if you're killing time, it's air conditioned. You go in there, you read them a book. If you get them enthusiastic about it, man, it's a great quiet time killer.
Yeah.
With kids.
Yeah.
If your kids can read, this is advice to whoever our listeners are out there. If you ever have kids, you get them into reading. Because a lot of times the kids they're bothering you. They're little. Like your mother always like, I miss when you're small. I don't. I mean, they're great and all. It's a lot of work. And they demand, and you should have your attention focused on them to a point. I mean, you have to be able to play independently.
Right.
It's not like you have to entertain them all the time. But you have to keep an eye on them.
Right.
But if they're reading, you can read. You can get some cleaning done or something, or you can relax.
Right. Now I have the opposite problem. I go to bookstores too often.
Well, that's true. There's no such thing.
I was just at one yesterday.
Were you really?
Yeah, I went with Molly.
Really?
And I got those two books there, the little tan volumes next to each other. I saw those last time. It was at that same bookstore we were at. Those are from 1934. Those are the Loeb classics of Aristotle. Love the Loeb classics. Where
was this at? Was
the
this
Bookhouse.
The Bookhouse.
Bookhouse, yeah, up off of
That's a neat
Manchester,
store.
yeah.
The only problem is they have too much inventory, so it stacks on the floor.
Yeah,
and
stacks
stuff.
on the floor. Yeah, I had a hard time finding those because they're just those tiny little slim volumes. That's Aristotle's Poetics, as well as some other like Greek authors on poetry and writing and stuff. And then
Longinus.
Longinus, yeah.
Longinus.
Or Dionysius. They're not sure who wrote that
the
one.
Sublime,
Yes.
and Demetrius on style.
Yes, and then the other one is a volume of Aristotle. That's the Eudemian Ethics, the Athenian Constitution on Virtues and Vices, I think.
Athenian Constitution, Eudemian Ethics, Vices and Virtues.
Yes.
You know, it's funny. I remember having a discussion with a philosophy professor back in the late 80s where the question was, is there anything that has philosophically really truly been discovered since Plato?
Yeah.
And documented? I don't know. You know, it's like, there's Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Aristotle. Plato. No, Plato, Aristotle.
Yes, Plato, Aristotle. Yeah.
And, some others, I mean, you say, oh, Descartes. Descartes is actually kind of derivative.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's always the joke, is that really every piece of philosophical writing, no matter where it is in some way, shape, or form responding to Plato.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause it's, okay, well, I'm really responding to this modern Arthur. Okay, well, who was he responding to? Some medieval guy who was quoting Aristotle, who was quoting Plato. Right? And it's like, it just all goes back to Plato at some point.
It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and that's part of the reason why I think Jesus is underappreciated as a revolutionary political and philosophical thinker. Whether he's God or not is beside the point on that particular issue, not generally, because it was brand new philosophy. I think.
Yeah. You should read.
Love your enemies. What is he, retarded?
You should read another book I have right behind you. I Judge No One, David Lloyd Dusenberry there. Yeah. That's about the political life of Jesus. I think I was mentioning that to you the other day, wasn't I? So. Yeah. Also a very good book.
But he did judge people.
Yes, that's kind of the point. That he talks about it in the book.
All right. Very good.
Yes.
Nice little aside there.
Yes. But yeah,
I think we're just about done.
I think we are.
I mean, his main point was there was a benefit in American society for some period of time to have this kind of clean slate where you had certain basic knowledge and basic foundation of certain principles like the Bible, Declaration of Independence of the Founding Fathers, and then the college students can build upon that with a thirst for knowledge and without preconceived notions of what they already believed as they're just coming into young adulthood. And they're smart and they have a base of knowledge and education. And that was beneficial. But then it was like, it just kind of opened up. And then it's like, well, then you're just an empty vessel. And then how do you fill that? And what's the most appropriate way to do that? And I assume that the rest of this book is going to be talking about that.
Generally, college students are really bad at knowing what they need to know. So if you have an education system designed of, do whatever you want, design sort of your own major, you're going to pick some really stupid classes.
Well, I think I don't know what his theory is going to be, but I think a lot of the problem is not just that. It's that there was nobody in there's nobody in the universities that are saying, what are you, stupid? Don't major in that. If your family's independently wealthy, absolutely, you want to study art history or you want to study one of these studies programs, knock yourself out because you don't have to earn a living. But if you have somebody in there that's like, what their goals are, well, I want to have get married and have a family and support my family. Maybe minor in art history or whatever, but fine. And especially if you're like a C-level student, if you're not going to be the top, something like that, get something functional. Yeah. It seems like there's nobody in the university system that is saying, no, that you're just wrong.
Yeah. I don't think anybody tells you that you're wrong in a university now.
That's why my philosophy.
Yes. Your opinion is wrong. Yes.
Your opinion is wrong.
Yes. I like this paragraph though. I'll read just this one as kind of way of conclusion.
You're just flippant with regard to my.
No, you're right. You're right.
Think
more people need to say your opinion is wrong.
Underlying philosophy of my attitude towards American society and educational system, which is your opinion is wrong, is in itself a revolutionary concept in American society.
Yeah, I agree.
You're just saying that to appease me. Go ahead. What was your brilliant point?
But I like what he says. He says, I do not believe that my generation, my cousins who have been educated in the American way, all of whom are MDs or PhDs, have any comparable learning compared to the past.
Yes.
He says, when they talk about heaven and earth, the relations between men and women, parents and children, the human condition, I hear nothing but cliches, superficialities, the material of satire. I'm not saying anything so trite as that life is fuller when people have myths to live by. I mean rather that a life based on the book is closer to the truth, that it provides the material for deeper research in and access to the real nature of things. Without the great revelations, epics, and philosophies as part of our natural vision, there's nothing to see out there and eventually little left inside. The Bible's not the only means to furnish a mind, but without a book of similar gravity, read with the gravity of the potential believer, it will remain unfurnished.
Yeah.
And he goes on, he concludes, really, we're disenchanted with the world. There's no drive to learn more about, how everything works, how the whole world is.
Yeah.
It's just this very sort of technical, do whatever you want sort of education that we're receiving now.
Well, it's like, what's the point?
Right.
You know? I mean, I think that's the big unanswered question in the United States right now. What's the point? Mm-hmm. Why even bother? It's like that brilliant William Shatner song, or he says, live basically your best life because you're going to die.
Yeah.
And he says, sometimes people get to the end and like, what was the point? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I'm waiting for the vinyl version of that album to finally get here as a gift to me from your mother.
Yes.
But who would have thought William Shatner, brilliant American? Yeah. Maybe we should unify behind William Shatner as the true American philosopher.
There you go. The William Shatner way.
You're not agreeing with this. He wrote those songs.
Yeah, I
co-wrote them and produced them with.
That's a good segue into next time. I think next time we'll read two because the next two are really short. Books and then music are the next two sections talking about what classic books are sort of important today, and then what is the state of music. I was surprised to see a section on music in here. That was surprising, but that's what we'll be talking about next time.
We're going to do both.
Yeah, why not?
I don't know.
One's like 6 pages. So
then we'll do two.
Both, yes.
Well, I look forward to the music. If you haven't listened to the full album, Has Been. No. Is it Has Been?
I think so.
Yeah, Has Been by William Shatner, re-released on vinyl in 2020, I think. You should listen to it now.
That's a good...
I'm saying that to the listener.
No, that's a good recommendation to the listener. Do you have any other final thoughts?
No.
All right. Well,
I don't often recommend music. I've never recommended music on the podcast.
I don't think you have. I don't know if I have either. I mean, maybe I've mentioned it a couple times way back when, but I don't often have a chance to mention music.
Yes.
All right. Well, this has been season 12, episode 2 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.